The red sunset poured over Copper Ridge, turning the parched town into a silent, burnt orange. The wind carried sand and dust that rattled on rusted tin roofs and into narrow streets that had long since deserted. The drought was now in its fourth month, and the despair in the eyes of every resident was palpable. Evelyn Grant clutched her thin coat tightly around her. At 28, she was used to being alone, a widow with no children, no close family, and no one who really needed her. People pitied her, but never invited her to dinner, let alone asked her about her life. They had their own worries: water. The town well was nearly dry, every drop now more precious than gold. Marshal Dixon had imposed strict restrictions, but everyone knew that wealthy families were secretly hoarding it, buying and selling it at exorbitant prices. Evelyn had no money, no power. Every night she went to bed thirsty, her lips cracked and bleeding. That morning, standing outside the window of Morrison's general store, watching other people line up with bags of flour and small cans of water, Evelyn saw it. A skinny dog with patchy brown and white fur, limping on its wounded hind legs. But what caught her attention was not its pitiful appearance, but the way it moved. It was not lost, not afraid of the shouts or the stones thrown by the shopkeepers. It kept going, determined, as if it knew every turn. A strange feeling rose in Evelyn's heart, a sense of synchronicity. She and it were both people who did not belong, abandoned in a community that never reached out. And as if pulled by an invisible string, she decided to follow. The dog led the way past the church, around the school, where the laughter of children stirred in Evelyn a sorrow for what she would never have. Then it headed toward the edge of town, where the cracked dirt hills hugged the houses that had been abandoned for ages. It stopped in front of the Morrison cabin. The dilapidated wooden house had a dark story attached to it. Joe Morrison and his family had disappeared one winter night. No one knew why. Since then, no one had dared to go near it. But today, Evelyn noticed something different. The weeds around the foundation had been trampled. The wooden door was ajar. The hinges had been newly oiled. Her heart pounded. The dog scratched lightly at the door 3 times, then sat down obediently, as if waiting for its owner to open it. Evelyn took a deep breath, her hand trembling as she touched the knob. "You followed him too?" The sudden voice from behind made her jump. Evelyn turned, her eyes wide. A man was standing in the shade of the pines, tall but sturdy, his sharp gray eyes reflecting the afternoon light. He wore a long-sleeved, dusty shirt, a heavy leather bag slung around his waist, and a scroll of maps slung over his shoulder. "Who are you?" Evelyn was wary, taking a step back. "Luke Carter. I'm a geologist, or at least I was." He curled his lips, the smile not reaching his eyes. "I've been tracking this dog for the past few days. He's a pretty good guide, huh?" Evelyn tightened her grip on his shirt. "If you're trying to scare me, I'm not one to be bullied." Luke shrugged. "I don't want any trouble, but Morrison Cabin is no place for a curious widow to wander into alone. There's more danger in there than the ghosts the villagers tell us." She felt suddenly irritated. "You think I need someone to warn me? I've lived long enough with oblivion. If there's anything here, I want to know." They looked at each other, their eyes meeting in a challenge. Finally, Luke nodded. "Okay, but if you go in now, I'll come with you. Trust me, you'll need me someday." The dog barked again, urging her on. With nowhere to retreat, Evelyn pushed the door open. It was dark inside, the smell of dust and damp wood hitting her in the face. But within seconds her eyes adjusted, and the sight on the wooden table in the middle of the room took her breath away. Hand-drawn geological maps, intricately drawn, marking underground veins. Rock samples in glass jars, carefully numbered. A letter in decisive handwriting. Main source, 40 feet, pure. "Holy cow," Evelyn whispered. Luke leaned down, his eyes flashing. "I know Morrison did research here. He found water, a huge underground vein." Evelyn turned, her heart pounding. "Are you sure? If it's true, it could save Copper Ridge." But as she reached for the letter, Luke grabbed her hand. "Wait, look at the signature." Evelyn's heart sank. At the bottom of the letter was the name of Silas Crow, a wealthy merchant who was still buying up land from the people at a fraction of the price. It can't be. Evelyn whispered. It could be. Luke growled. Crow knows he's deliberately letting the whole town dry up just to monopolize this water. The room suddenly felt heavy. Evelyn was stunned, her hands shaking. But before she could think any further, the dog's growling interrupted her. It stared out the window, its fur bristling. Luke tensed. Someone's coming. Footsteps on dry branches, then a familiar voice from the porch. Silas Crow's voice, smooth but cold. Evelyn froze. Luke tightened his grip on her shoulder. We have to hide. Now. They glanced around the room. Every corner was empty, no escape. The dog barked softly, then ran to the corner of the floor, where a plank was slightly open. Luke understood immediately, bent down and pried it open. A small, dark cellar appeared. Down, he whispered. Evelyn hesitated for a moment, then slid in with the dog. Luke followed, just in time to pull the plank back. The hinges squeaked. The cabin door opened. Heavy boots stepped in. Evelyn held her breath. Through the gap she saw Crow, and next to him, Marshal Dixon, the town sheriff. Cold sweat broke out on her back. The man she had trusted to protect the people was now standing next to the man who had betrayed Copper Ridge. Next to him, Luke whispered softly, just loud enough for Evelyn to hear. Now do you understand why I said this is not a place for you alone? In the stifling darkness, Evelyn clenched her hands into the damp earth, feeling Luke's breath close to her. They've only met for a few minutes, but now they share a secret that could change the fate of their town, or bury them forever. In the cramped basement, Evelyn listened to the sound of boots on the wooden floor above. The smell of cheap tobacco mixed with the smell of damp wood seeping through the cracks, making her breath even harder to hold. Right next to her, Luke remained absolutely silent, his sharp eyes following every movement through the cracks. Silas Crow's voice rang out, slurred but full of authority. The map is still here. Morrison really knows how to do things. Too bad he's too soft-hearted. Dixon's reply was low and vague. The townspeople are starting to get suspicious. They're asking why you keep buying land when the water is running out. I can't keep them quiet forever. Crow chuckled, his laugh as sharp as a knife. Let them be thirsty for another month. When the children's stomachs growl, the adults will be ready to sign all the papers. When we announce the water source, I'll be the savior, at a price they never expected. Evelyn's hands clenched into fists. The rising anger made her want to jump up and face her, but Luke placed a strong hand on her arm, his eyes signaling, "Be quiet, not yet." The sound of chairs moving, then the rustling of papers. Crow and Dixon were gathering evidence. Luke frowned, whispering, "We can't let them take it all. We have to find a way to keep some of it." But before she could think, the sound of footsteps on the porch echoed. A strange voice called out, "Silas, there are people on horseback coming up the hill. There are many, there are a whole council." The atmosphere suddenly became chaotic. Crowd grind. "Bring the map. Get out of the way, quickly." The sound of haste rang out, the back door slammed shut. The cabin floor shook slightly and then fell silent. Evelyn gasped, rushed out of the cellar, Luke following closely. On the wooden table, the papers were almost swept away, but there was one left under the table. She quickly picked it up. The handwriting was scrawled, signed Joe Morrison, and dated just 2 weeks ago. "Joe, he was still alive until recently," Evelyn whispered. Luke frowned. If so, Crow must have killed him. This is the proof we need. Before she could say more, the front door burst open. Clara Whitmore and several council members rushed in, guns drawn. Her eyes scanned the room, then stopped on Evelyn, dusty, the papers shaking in her hand. "Evelyn Grant? What are you doing here?" Evelyn wavered, unable to find the words. Luke took a step forward, more composed. "We have proof." Crow and Dixon hit a spring. Morrison left a message. The room fell into a tense silence. Then Clara nodded, taking the paper. Her eyes darkened as she read. "So the worst has happened." That afternoon, the rumor spread like wildfire through Copper Ridge. People poured into the streets, outraged by the story of the underground water and Crow's plot. But at the same time, skepticism was directed toward Evelyn and Luke, the two outsiders who had suddenly appeared with the shocking story. "How can we believe it?" one snapped. She's just a widow who's fallen from grace. And where did he come from? Evelyn lowered her head, the familiar feeling of doubt tightening her heart. But Luke stood straight, his voice firm. If you don't believe me, just follow this map. I'll lead the way. The underground water is there, and I'll dig it out for you. The fierce look in his gray eyes made the crowd pause. Clara finally nodded. Okay, but first we have to catch Crow. If he runs to the capital with a different story, we'll lose everything. Night fell. On the hillside, Evelyn sat by the small fire, watching Luke adjust his saddle. The stray dog lay snugly in her lap, eyes half closed but ears still alert. Do you really believe you can fight Crow? She asked, her voice hoarse and tired. Luke looked up, his face half lit by the firelight, half hidden in the darkness. I worked for him. I know how he thinks, and I know that if I don't stop him, this whole town will die of thirst. Evelyn looked down at her chapped hands. I'm just a lonely woman. They've never listened to me before. Why would this time be different? Luke was silent for a moment, then sat down beside her. His voice was warm but firm, because this time you're not alone. For a moment their eyes met. Evelyn saw not only determination in him, but also hidden pain. She didn't dare ask, but she sensed that Luke had also lost something great. The next morning they set out. The small group consisted of Clara, 2 loyal gunmen, Evelyn, Luke, and the dog. They crossed the barren hills following Crow's trail. It was midday, the sun was scorching. Evelyn was exhausted, her horse stopped. Luke turned immediately, holding out his hand. Give me the reins. Rest a while. She wanted to protest, but his determined gaze made her let go. He led both horses into the rare shade of a cliff. He took a water bottle from his pocket and handed it to her. Drink. Evelyn hesitated. And you? Luke chuckled dryly. I'm used to thirst, don't worry. In that moment, Evelyn felt her heart waver. A strange man, and yet he was willing to share the last drop of water. In the afternoon, they reached a narrow ravine. There were fresh tracks before them, deep hoof prints, heavy drag marks of a sack. Luke bent down to check, frowning. We're almost there. But as soon as he looked up, a whistling sound rang out. The bullet hit the ground right next to Evelyn. Ambush? Clara shouted. A figure burst from the cliff, guns blazing. Bullets whizzed past her ears. Evelyn panicked, but Luke pulled her down behind the rock. Stay low, he shouted, drawing his gun to fire back. Smoke, horses neighing, dogs barking madly combined into a melee. Evelyn trembled, her heart about to jump out of her chest. Suddenly a man with a knife approached from the side. She screamed, retreating. Luke turned his head, but was too far away. Instincts rose. Evelyn grabbed the fallen log next to her and swung hard. The other man was hit, falling. Good job, Luke cried, his eyes shining with encouragement amid the smoke. Finally, the ambush group fled, leaving a few bloodstains on the ground. Clara growled, Crow's men. He won't let us live. Evelyn stood panting, the log falling from her hand. But when her eyes accidentally met Luke's, they both smiled slightly, a nervous but sympathetic smile. That night, they camped by the dry creek. Clara and the others took turns keeping watch. Evelyn sat far from the fire, holding the dog. Luke came over, sat down beside her and said nothing for a while. Then he spoke, his voice as soft as the wind. I used to work with Joe Morrison. He was not only a colleague, but also a mentor. When Crow found out he wanted to open the spring, I tried to stop him. But I failed. Joe disappeared. I knew what happened, but I had no proof, until I met you. Evelyn choked. I know that feeling too, losing the person you love the most and not being able to do anything about it. Silence fell. 2 people, 2 pains, suddenly found an echo in each other. Luke turned, his eyes no longer cold, but a rare warmth. Maybe fate let that dog lead you to the cabin, and lead me to you. Evelyn's cheeks flushed, her heart pounding. She didn't answer, just bent down and stroked the dog's shaggy fur. But deep down, she knew, from this moment on, she was no longer truly alone. Before dawn, Clara woke the group. Crow has gone ahead, heading for the capital. If he gets there, he will turn the truth around. We must stop him today. The dawn light dyed the horizon pink. Evelyn held the reins tightly. Luke rode close by, his eyes stern but determined. The dog limped behind, refusing to leave their side for a moment. A new journey had begun. a life-or-death pursuit. But this time, Evelyn was no longer just a lonely widow. By her side was Luke, an ally, a protector, and perhaps the seed of a budding love. The sun was blazing in the western sky, baking the cracked earth. The small group rode across the dusty valley, hurrying as if the life of Copper Ridge hung on their backs. Clara led the way, her eyes fixed on the tracks of the wheels in the dry earth. Luke rode close beside Evelyn, his fingers tightening on the reins. The dog limped but followed resolutely, his bright eyes guiding the way. "We're getting closer," Luke said softly, glancing at the deep hoofprints. "Crow's got a lot of baggage, he won't go fast." Evelyn nodded, sweat streaking her cheeks. She tightened her grip on her scarf, tension building in her chest. For years she had lived as a shadow, but now every beat of her heart urged her to stand, to fight for the town and for herself. As dusk fell, they reached the narrow gorge where the cliffs rose on either side. Clara raised her hand to signal them to stop. "This place is dangerous. If I were Crow, I would choose this place for an ambush." As if to prove it, the gunshot rang out sharply. The bullet grazed Clara's helmet and stuck into the rock behind her. "Ambush!" Luke shouted. From above, a figure jumped out. The gun went off loudly. Rocks and dirt flew everywhere, and horses neighed chaotically. Evelyn clung to the saddle, her heart about to jump out of her chest. Luke urged his horse to get closer, shielding her. "Get off your horse. Hide behind the rock." He pulled her along, and the two of them rushed into the narrow gap. Clara and the two other gunmen returned fire fiercely, the sound of gunfire echoing throughout the alley. But Crow was well prepared. He and a few of his trusted men took up high ground, firing from above. Evelyn trembled. Her back pressed against the cold rock. "We're trapped." "No way." Luke pulled out his gun, his eyes shining. "Trust me." He rushed out, firing continuously. Each shot was accurate, forcing the other to duck. In that moment he shouted, "Evelyn, run to the other side. Go." She hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll follow. Go." Her heart clenched, but her instincts made her obey. Evelyn dashed across the gap, the bullet whistling past her heels. She rolled into the rock crevice, her chest heaving. Luke was right behind her, lunging forward, his shoulder scraping against the rocks, blood spurting from his face. Evelyn panicked. "You're hurt." "It's okay. Just a scratch." But cold sweat was beading on his forehead. They were both panting, their backs pressed together. The gunfire outside was still relentless. Evelyn trembled, taking his hand. If we don't make it," Luke turned, his gray eyes blazing. "Don't say that. We'll live. And after all this, I won't leave you alone again." Evelyn choked, tears welling up. Amid the smoke and danger, a new light flickered in her heart. Love, which she thought had died with her husband. The gunfight continued until Clara and her comrades had made room. They regrouped, retreating deeper into the canyon. But Crow did not give up. His laughter echoed off the walls. "You think you can stop me? I will buy this valley and you too." "You will pay, Crow," Clara shouted back, holding up the Morrison survey paper Evelyn had brought with her. "Here is the proof. The people of Copper Ridge know the truth." Crow's laughter died away, replaced by an angry roar. A new volley of gunfire erupted, more fierce. In the chaos, Evelyn and Luke were separated from the group. They ran deep into another canyon, pursued by the enemy. Night fell, the moonlight glinting on the steel guns. They hid in the small cave, breathing heavily. Luke knelt, the wound in his shoulder bleeding more profusely. Evelyn quickly tore off the strip of her dress, pressing it tightly to the wound. "You've lost too much blood." Her voice was shaking. He took her hand, his eyes glistening in the firelight. "Evelyn, listen to me. If anything." "Don't say that." She burst into tears, her blood-stained hands shaking. "You gave me faith, showed me I wasn't invisible. I can't lose you again." In that moment, all distance was erased. Luke pulled her into his arms, his lips finding hers. The kiss was passionate, mixed with the salt of tears and gunpowder. Evelyn's heart exploded, and for the first time in years she felt truly alive. "Evelyn," Luke whispered as he pulled away, his voice hoarse. "I swear to protect you, not just for the town, but for me, because I love you." She buried her face in his chest, listening to his pounding heartbeat. "Me too." After all these years, I've finally found someone to ride with." Outside, the wind whistled through the rocky gorge, but inside the cave, two souls that had seemed closed off now beat as one. The next dawn, they left the cave, determined to stop Crow before he reached the capital. Luke's wound was bandaged, but his eyes were bright, unflinching. They found him when they reached a wide ravine. Silas Crow stood in the middle of the clearing, his horse loaded with sacks. Several henchmen surrounded them, guns ready. "Oh, the widow and the traitorous engineer." Crow curled his lips. "You are persistent." Evelyn stepped forward, her voice booming. "You let children die of thirst, just to satisfy your greed. You are not worthy to be called human." Crow sneered. "Ideals are empty. Might is the law. And I have guns." He drew his gun, but Luke was faster. Two bullets exploded simultaneously. Crow's grazed Evelyn's hair, Luke's hit his shoulder. Crow screamed, fell to the ground, but still tried to raise his head, eyes full of hatred. "You think you've won? Greed never dies. There will be others." Clara and the council arrived just in time, tying up the henchmen. Crow was dragged away, blood staining his luxurious shirt. That afternoon, under the bright sun, the group returned to Copper Ridge. As they led their horses into the square, the villagers poured out. Clara held up the Morrison survey, her voice booming. "We have won justice. The well is for everyone, not just one." Cheers erupted. Evelyn stood in the middle of the crowd, Luke beside her, his hand clasped in hers. The looks on them were no longer pity, but admiration and gratitude. Evelyn choked up. All her life, she had been on the sidelines. But now, thanks to a dog, an abandoned cabin, and a man who had entered her heart, she was truly seen. Luke leaned down and whispered, "We did it, but our journey has only just begun." Evelyn smiled through her tears. "As long as you are with me, I fear nothing." That night, Copper Ridge was filled with music and cheers around the new well. But Evelyn and Luke chose to leave that vortex, walking up the high hill where the wind carried the scent of newly opened moist soil. The two sat side by side, silently watching the bright moonlight shining down on the valley. Below, the torches flickered like small stars, and in the sky, millions of stars shone, as if witnessing another beginning. The loyal dog lay between the two, breathing evenly and gently, as if also finding peace after a long journey. Evelyn gently leaned her head on Luke's shoulder, her voice softer than the wind. "Will you stay?" Luke turned around, his rough but warm hand clasped hers. In his eyes was an unwavering determination. "If you want, I will stay. Forever." Evelyn looked up, her eyes sparkling like a mirror reflecting the full moon. A tear was about to fall, but it was no longer a tear of pain, but of happiness. "I want." She hesitated, then said firmly, "More than anything." At that moment, Luke leaned down. His kiss was no longer hasty like in a dark and dangerous cave, but deep, gentle, and long-lasting, as if wanting to fill all the lonely years they had both experienced. Evelyn wrapped her arms around his neck, trembling but surging, her heart pounding violently under her chest. The wind blew her hair, mixed with his hot breath. They kissed not only with their lips, but with everything they had suppressed for so long: pain, loss, hope, and desire to live again. When they parted, foreheads still touching, Evelyn smiled through her rapid breaths. "This is not just a new beginning, but the life I have been waiting for." Luke hugged her tightly, his voice hoarse but full of love. "So from now on, we will continue to write that life together, no longer alone." They kissed again, a long, sweet kiss, no longer of despair, but of a promise for a new beginning. That summer, Copper Ridge transformed. From a land of thirst, the town suddenly became an oasis, thanks to the underground water Morrison had discovered. Under the golden sunlight, streams of clear water gushed from the new well, spreading through the primitive channels, watering the fields, seeping into the parched soil. The cheers of children each time they scooped water echoed throughout the square. The sounds of hammers and saws were bustling as people rebuilt abandoned fields. No longer did people look at each other with jealous eyes for a ladle of water. Instead, there were smiles and sharing. Evelyn stood by the well, a wooden bucket soaked with water in her hand. The morning light shone down on her face, radiant for the first time after many years of loneliness. Amidst the laughter and chatter around her, she heard familiar footsteps. Luke stepped forward, his shoulders still bandaged, but his posture was proud and his eyes were bright. He placed his hand on the rim of the well, looking down at the sparkling water like jade. Mr. Morrison was right, and now everyone believes. Evelyn smiled, handing him the dipper. Not just in water, but in justice, in us. Luke took it, took a long drink, and then handed her the rest. Their hands met over the wooden dipper, and their eyes locked as if they would never let go. Silas Crow had no more chance to cause trouble. After the gunfight in the canyon, he was mortally wounded and taken back to Copper Ridge. The angry crowd threw him dirty looks. Marshal Dixon, once a champion of the law, now bowed in chains, was taken to prison to face charges of treason. Clara Whitmore, a strong woman who had stood tall in the storm, became the new leader of the council. At the first meeting, she declared loudly, "This aquifer belongs to everyone. No one can have exclusive ownership of it. This is a lesson we must remember, that when greed overcomes conscience, the whole community suffers, but when we unite, justice prevails." Applause rang out, spreading across the square. Evelyn sat next to Luke, silently squeezing his hand. She had never felt so much like she belonged here. In the days that followed, Copper Ridge quickly revived. Green rice fields replaced the red dusty fields. People enthusiastically planted and raised livestock, rebuilding the dream that had collapsed. As for Evelyn, she no longer lived on the sidelines. The villagers invited her to the table, asking her to look after Morrison's survey map like a treasure. Every time they met, they asked her opinion, not just as a witness, but as a new part of the town's soul. One afternoon, Clara came over and put her hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "You gave us courage. Never think of yourself as an invisible widow. You are the one who pulled Copper Ridge back from the dead." Evelyn choked. "I didn't do it alone. Luke, and this dog." She bent down to stroke the dog's patchy, now healed fur, is an indispensable companion. The dog raised its head, its eyes clear as a smile, its tail wagging. The people called it Scout, because it was it that led the whole town to hope. One moonlit night, Evelyn stepped out onto the porch of her newly rebuilt house, watching the moonlight fall on the green grass. The cool night breeze carried the scent of young rice. Luke approached, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. He smiled, a little embarrassed. "I have nothing but these flowers." Evelyn took them, her heart fluttering like a young girl's. "For me, this is enough." Luke looked deep into her eyes. "Evelyn, you've lived in the darkness for too long. But you've stood up, you've fought, and you deserve the light. I don't want to leave this place anymore. I want to start over with you." Tears glistened in her eyes. "Are you sure? This isn't an easy life." "I'm not looking for ease," Luke said, his voice firm. "I'm looking for where my heart belongs, and I believe it's with you." In the silver moonlight, he held her. This kiss was no longer rushed in the smoke of gunfire, but gentle, complete, like an eternal oath. A few months passed. Copper Ridge was filled with life. In the fields, children chased each other across the ditch, their laughter ringing. In the square, the market was bustling again, full of fresh vegetables and fruits. Evelyn and Luke opened a small house on the edge of town, where they grew flowers, raised chickens, and cared for Scout. People often came, not only to get water from the well, but also to hear advice, to hear the story of two people who dared to stand up to greed. One morning, as the sun was just rising, Evelyn placed the teapot on the wooden table on the porch. Luke came out, put his arms around her from behind, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "You know," he said softly, "when I first saw you in front of the cabin, I thought you were so reckless, but so strong. And I know that if I had not followed you into that cabin, I would have missed out on my life." Evelyn smiled, taking his calloused hand. "And you, without me, you would have remained a forgotten shadow. I tell you, even a widow can be a hero, and can love again." They sat there, watching the sun rise, their hearts filled with peace. That evening, the whole town gathered around the new well to celebrate the first harvest. The torches were blazing, the music was loud. Clara stood in the middle of the square, her voice loud. Today we celebrate not only the harvest, but also our unity. And we are grateful to those who saved us, Evelyn Grant and Luke Carter. Cheers filled the air. Evelyn blushed, but Luke grabbed her hand tightly, pulling her into the middle of the crowd. His eyes were bright, full of pride. In the blazing firelight, amid the cheers and applause, they shared a sweet kiss, openly, without any hesitation. The people applauded loudly, as if witnessing not just a love, but a symbol of the revival of the whole town. Late at night, when the fire was dying down, Evelyn sat next to Luke and Scout, looking at the bright stars. She whispered, "Perhaps fate has led me on a circuitous path, but in the end, it has brought me to the right place." Luke squeezed her hand. "And that place is with me." Together they looked up at the starry sky. No more darkness of loneliness, no more burning thirst of despair, only love, faith, and rebirth. Copper Ridge had found water, Evelyn had found love, and in each of their hearts they knew, from now on, things would be different. Evelyn and Luke's story shows us a simple yet powerful truth. Sometimes a stray dog can open the way to hope. When greed seeks to drown a community, only unity can save it all. And even in hearts that seem closed by loss, love can still sprout, heal, and work miracles. Never think you are invisible. An ordinary person, even a weak one, can still become a guiding light for the whole community, as long as they dare to step up, dare to speak the truth, and dare to believe in the good. If you were in the position of Evelyn, a lonely widow facing the conspiracy of powerful people, would you choose to stay silent to preserve yourself, or dare to stand up and speak the truth to save the town? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below.